Welcome to Power Players. And we've got our good friend and fan favorite, Jared Tendler, with us today, a trading psychologist. It's very nice to have you here, sir, once again.
Great to see you, Eddie. How you doing?
Well, I'm going to back out of here and work your magic, my friend. And with John Hoagland, remember, you've got the questions and you're ready to go. Have a great segment.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Eddie. And Jared, welcome. It's always a pleasure having you with us. I know everybody's very excited to hear what you've got to say today. Most of all, maybe me. And we're just going to get going here. I mean, if you don't know Jared, you should make sure and buy his book, The Mental Game of Trading. If you're a poker player, he's also got two other books, The Mental Game of Poker 1 and 2. He's also a scratch golfer and a hell of a nice guy. Without too much ado, we are going to let you get started here, Jared, and have a great session.
Thanks, John. Yeah, appreciate it. Good to see you as always. Good to see all of you, and got a big crowd here today, which is great. So some new people. I'll kind of go over some of my, kind of main concepts that I often talk about. They're obviously discussed in the book, but I'll give you some high-level concepts here. And I'm just going to kind of roll through the questions that were submitted in advance. I think a lot of them are very common. Many of you struggle with the same kinds of issues, but the surface level stuff that you see does not always kind of fully explain like what is happening. And so we're going to kind of try to peer beneath the surface a little bit, try to problem solve at a deeper level. We don't have to get personal. Right? I mean, let's call that out, right? What I deal with a lot of my clients and what the book is all about is what I would call these performance flaws, these biases, these wishes, these illusions, these hopes. Right? Those are the real problems. And what we end up seeing on the surface is the violation of your rules, the greed, the anger, the FOMO, the blowing of accounts regularly, these cycles that you get into. Like those are the problems on the surface, right? And when we start to dig down and find these performance flaws, that is where you can have a much more profound impact on your ability to solve a lot of the problems that you're struggling with. And I think some of you are here kind of hoping that you're going to find some, magic in a bottle, right? Like the one thing that I can say that's going to magically change your mindset, magically change your performance, eliminate the greed, the FOMO, the anger, et cetera. Now, that may happen for some of you, but the odds are it's not. Okay? And that's not to say that we're not going to find some solid answers, but, I can't give you bigger muscles if I was a personal trainer, right? You got to get in the gym and you got to do the work. And so that's what my system is designed for. It's to provide you with a framework so that you can go out and put the work in and be able to level up your mentality, right? Reduce your emotionality and be able to perform more consistently. And that's kind of how it should be, right? If any of you are able to just download some, trading software that was, an algo and started printing money, like that would be cool, but you wouldn't be a trader at that point. You would just be somebody who's making money. And you got to get pretty lucky for that to happen. So what we're after, right, is the ability to build real skill. Okay. And we're talking about from a trading standpoint, but also a mental standpoint. And it's not overly complicated, but a lot of times you're hoping and wishing that it's going to be easy. And you're not really prepared for those times where those reps in the gym burn, right? And it's hard and you got to push through it. In the gym, it's sometimes easier because it's very structured, right? Your mind, like how do you build skill here? And that's what I'm going to talk about a bit today, but I'm going to do it in the context of these questions. So let's get into this first one. I've been up on my accounts, but then I blow them. It's like I can't walk away once I'm down. Can you give me any advice on this? All right, I'm sure there's many of you who are kind of in this category here. So what happens when you're down? My guess is there's a little bit of what I call the F-its. I probably use a little saltier language if I was working one-on-one with you, but right, the F-its, right? You just kind of give up and you're down 30, 40% in the account. It's like, well, what's the point? I might as well just say F it. If I get lucky and I'm able to get back, well then great. And if not, well then I'll just, reset and start again. But you got to think about what comes next. Because if you get lucky and you just make back that money and you get the account back to a spot where, you still have a chance of passing that combine, what do you gain? you're not really in a better position because you haven't developed any skill. You're just kind of gambling your way out. And so what's going to happen if you were actually funded? You're going to do the same thing again. So you've got to kill the efforts. You've got to like kind of build a backbone at that moment and say, no, I'm not going to gamble my way out of this. I'm going to steadily climb my way back up. And yeah, it's not fun, okay, to do that. It's much easier and much more fun to gamble and make it back and reset. You know, it's a bit lazy, truthfully, to do that too, right? You're not willing to put in the harder work to develop the real skill to grind your way back. Because if you do that, then when you pass the combine, you are in a far better position to stay funded. Right? So many of you get so short-sighted, you're not thinking about what comes next. And so that's a prime example of that problem. Next question. I am constantly thinking about my previous trades, especially when they are break-even trades or losers. How do I get my mind off of this? Thank you. Well, a simple way is just writing. Okay, when your mind is just sort of snowballing and spiraling, what do a lot of us do? Like we would go and vent and, you know, complain to somebody else. And that's actually not the worst thing in the world. But who's going to listen to you? That's one of the benefits of having a community of traders. You can find some people that, you know, can kind of commiserate on this, but that's not great. It just doesn't really, it might get it off your mind temporarily, but you know, what then, right? You're just going to kind of have to be in that situation again because you're not really solving anything. The benefit of writing is that it allows you to kind of dump your thoughts on paper, and then you get to look at it, or on, you know, a Word doc. You get to look at it and see what is kind of off about your thinking. What can you actually correct? And the odds are you're probably overly focused on results. And this game is different than what many of you are used to, right? There's a lot more short-term control. There's a lot more short-term predictability around your results. You know, if you know, take golf or other sports. I mean, I fairly well know, right? If I've hit the ball pretty well, right, I'm going to get the results that I want. Now, there is luck in golf. There is luck in other sports, you know, and so having that feedback gives me a sense of control, right? In trading, you don't have that in the short term, right? And if you do, it's around your process, not your results. So when you're constantly thinking about your break-even trades or your losses, right, the odds are that you're overly focused on that because you're expected to have better results. But if your execution was really solid, right, if you know that you're making good trades, well, then it's just a matter of time before things start to turn around. And that short-term drop in P&L is just the natural variation that exists, right? You are trying to become the casino versus the customer going into the casino. Because in the casino, right, the house has the edge, right? And they are bankrolled to sustain the big ups and downs that go throughout the day, right? We're paying out jackpots, you know, nothing comes out for a while. And so they're sort of flush. And then, yeah, then there's a surge of, you know, money going out from all different games, right? So they're built to withstand those big ups and downs in their sort of short-term results. But the overall trend line is positive, right? And all we have to do is just look at the size of the buildings that are in Vegas to prove that that's true. So being overly focused on results in the short term is problematic. In the long term, it's I think essential. I don't want any of you to be delusional by being overly process or execution oriented, right? If in the long run you're not getting good results, well then something is likely off, whether it be your strategy in sync with the market or just your strategy as a whole. But in the short term, if you have a strategy that you can trust and rely on, well then you have to be much more focused on that. And I'd say almost like a little bit psychopathic, right? Where you're just ignoring the noise coming in, ignoring the data that says, hey, your results aren't what they should be. But when you're controlling what you can control, which is your execution, is your decision-making, is your process, your preparation, the way that you review, the way you backtest, the work that you're doing, all of that you have firmly in control. If you're doing all that and you're focused on it, then it kind of helps to balance out your focus, being overly too results oriented in the short term. All right, next question. When I trade my demo account, it makes money. When I trade the combine or my real account, I am not profitable and can't pinpoint what I'm doing differently. What can I do to pinpoint what my mind is doing differently? And Jack, if we can share my screen here. This is a tool that I use called a data collection worksheet. And frankly, you can use this, and I say you, meaning any of you here, as a way of better understanding what your mind is going through at any point during the trading day, to capture the thoughts, the emotions, the triggers, the specific changes in your actions, right? Or physical signs. You might get hyper-focused on certain positions or certain screens. Your thoughts may spiral, and you might have a little bit of FOMO, a little bit of revenge, expecting to make some money in this position, a little bit of overconfidence, right? You can feel your emotions as some maybe butterflies in your stomach or some tension in your chest, right? That maybe a signal of fear, anger, right? Some heat in your head. Point is, if you can write down this data around your either mistakes or lost trades. Again, the lost trades, we don't know that you're doing something different at that point, but if you just write it down, it might give you a bit of an indication. And then when you go back to the sim, you can kind of see if those data points exist. It's just giving you a little bit more of an opportunity to capture what's going through your mind. And you certainly can do this in the sim as well. It might look qualitatively different, which is what you're trying to figure out. And then when you start to look at what's showing up in the live market or in the combine, the specific problems, right, that are present are the things that you're going to start to break down. But from an awareness standpoint, which is what you're trying to build now, this tool is essential and is, to me, the beginning of my system, right? It's the ability to collect the data that you're eventually going to use to create a map, which I'll get into a little bit later today. All right, just keeping this open here, Jack. The next question is, what is the psychology behind self-sabotage in trading? I do it a lot, even though I know I shouldn't. So the first thing we're going to do is delete the term self-sabotage. I know that it is very common, even in psychology, but to me, it's a BS term, okay? Self-sabotage implies a level of control that you don't have. Right? That's the whole point, right? Here you are acting against your own interests and thinking that you have some control, that it's like you're willfully undermining your own efforts. And that certainly can happen, right, in revenge trading, right? Here you are, 3 lost trades in a row, and you can feel yourself, like wanting to just triple a position, just re-enter immediately. But, there's an awareness that that you shouldn't do that. And that awareness is not enough to stop you from doing it. And so then in that moment, it feels like you are willfully violating what your mind knows you shouldn't do. But there's an element of control, okay, that is implied in self-sabotage, as if you are the one acting against your own interest. But that's not what is happening here. It is not a conscious decision. What's happening is described in this graphic. Okay, and this is called the Yerkes-Dodson law. I call it the performance stress curve. Okay, I'll get to the answer in a second, but basically what this does is looks at the relationship between performance and stress. Okay, and so as your emotions, as your energy, as your arousal, as your stress rises, your performance rises, right? When you're bored, distracted, really tired, lazy, you suck, right? And so then as your energy and emotions rise to, let's say, the theoretical 50, that is where you are performing at an optimal level, okay? Optimal performance, optimal execution does not come when you are truly in a relaxed state. It might feel relaxed, but you are not calm, okay? Now, what happens is that as your emotions rise too high, right? The FOMO, the greed, the anger, the overconfidence, sometimes even the lack of confidence, right? As that rises, you start to now suck for different reasons. One side, you have too little energy, too little emotion. The other side, you've got too much, okay? And it starts to wear you down, okay? Now, when you get into this phase of like 80 to 90, okay? So 100 is like the blue screen. 100 is like your mind is totally blank and you are just purely instinctually reacting, okay? And that's where all the, big mistakes tend to happen because you have no ability to have conscious, input on your decisions. But at 80 to 90, which is what's happening here, okay? when there's self-sabotage, you have enough awareness to know that what you're doing is wrong, but that part of the brain has been significantly weakened. So you're aware, but that awareness does not translate into action, does not translate into control. Okay. So you're basically getting run over and your emotions are steamrolling that. Okay. So self-sabotage is not what's happening here. Self-sabotage is a BS term that really can only happen when you have an incredible amount of skill, right? I can purposefully lose in ping pong against my daughter because I'm so skilled relative to her. Okay. But in this scenario, you are not skilled enough to stop the problems from happening. So you are not the one doing it. What is happening is you have these underlying flaws, biases, wishes, illusions that are tripping you up. Okay. They get exposed at the time when your emotions are high. Okay. That's what's producing the emotion. And that is what is tripping you up. You don't have enough conscious control to work against your emotions, which is why the data collection worksheet is so helpful, because you can start to begin to map that escalation of emotion going from 50 all the way down to 90. And if you create a map, and again, maybe I'll just show this real quick. This is an example of a map of anger. Okay, this is what we want to eventually create. Okay, and you'll see there are 10 levels. So level 1, irritated by negative P&L, right, or missed opportunity. That is the most minor level of anger that this trader had identified. You go all the way down to the bottom, right? Tilt. Can't stop myself. Feeling numbness, followed by feeling of regret. Number 9, feeling frustration, hurting yourself, right? That's what you're talking about. That's where the self-sabotage lives. But it begins at level 1 and escalates downward. If you are going to stop yourself, you got to catch it early, right? And you can see they've identified point of no return is at number 4. Okay. So if you get past number 4, you're dead. Right? All of this is, almost inevitable unless you get lucky and happen to win, or, you're able to kind of rip yourself away from the computer. Okay. So when your emotions start to rise, they take control. And if you're going to take that control back, you've got to catch it early. Otherwise, you're going to get steamrolled. All right. How do you not let a winning or losing streak affect the mindset of a trader? While we're here, let's get into another tool that I use. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you. I don't want you to get overwhelmed. By the end of today, make sure you choose at least one thing that you're going to work on, whether it's starting the data collection worksheet, whether it's beginning to do a map like what you just saw, or whether it's this, which is called an A to C game analysis. Okay. And this is an example. Now, what we're trying to do is describe the differences between your A game, your B game, and your C game. Why? Because it helps you to have a more execution-oriented mentality. So how do you not let a winning or losing streak affect your mindset? Well, you focus on your execution more than your results. And you can do that by giving yourself direct feedback based on how you're performing. Because sometimes it's hard, okay? If your strategy is not razor sharp written down that you can qualify what is, an A trade, a B trade, a C trade, an F trade, all the way down, right? Immediately, then we're also looking at these qualitative factors for how you are thinking, feeling, reacting, and ultimately making decisions and executing. We can look at it. It takes a little bit of time to build. And so what I would suggest is you think about, the most obvious, like what does it look like when you're at your best? What does it look like when you're at your worst? And then begin to kind of build in that B game. Give yourself a couple weeks to do the data collection, then start to kind of line things up and make those clear distinctions between A game, B game, C game. I'm less concerned about the difference between the mental and the tactical, right? Eventually you want to have that teased out because it will help you actually become a better trader from a technical standpoint more efficiently. But for right now, from a grading standpoint, from a transitioning out of being overly results oriented to more process and execution oriented, it doesn't matter. We just want the clear distinction between A, B, and C so that at the end of the day or at the end of particular trades or throughout the day, you can grade yourself, right? And just look at it. Am I feeling relaxed and decisive and patient, right? If I am, then I'm in my A game. If I'm overthinking, if I'm losing focus, if I'm missing obvious trades, I'm in my B game, right? And then clearly if I've got major distractions, no patience, and trading P&L, well, then I'm in my C game. And you will make different decisions throughout the day based on your performance. Because one of the things that is so dangerous is that emotions can masquerade as intuition. Emotions can convince you that the thoughts that you have to let this one ride, or to close a position early, or to stay on the sidelines, or any of the bad behavior, like emotions are oftentimes the culprit behind that. And they're in our head convincing us that they are justified. But when you objectify them, you put them down on paper. That's why the data collection is so helpful, because it can clearly distinguish bad thinking from high quality thinking. And there are patterns associated with this, right? You just got to write it down and create a bit more detail. I mean, you don't want to go into as much sort of structure as I'm providing. If you simply wrote down all of the thoughts that are associated with bad behavior, right? Associated with violations of your rules, then just look out for them. They become like a most wanted list, right? When I see myself thinking like, I know what the direction of the market's going to be here, or, this one has to be a winner, or, there's no way that this is going to reach my target, right? Any of those kind of BS ideas in your head, right? Write them down. When you see them, then you know that something is off and you can do something different, whether it means ripping yourself away so you just let the trade ride, or making a different decision thereafter if you've already made a mistake. All right, we can stop the screen share here. Next question. How do you adjust your mind when you keep losing your money? So the question kind of implies that the adjustment of your mind is sort of as simple as making a small tweak. Now, maybe sometimes that perspective is easy to adopt, but in my experience, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in trading. So really the question should be, how do you adjust your emotions when you keep losing your money? Because your emotions are oftentimes driving your thoughts. So what are the emotions that are associated with losing? Are you getting angry? Are you getting fearful? Are you losing confidence? First, you got to define that. Then what are the actions that are following afterwards, right? Are you protecting your capital unnecessarily? Are you, being far too aggressive? And then we can kind of start to peer back and understand what some of those underlying flaws might be. Now, you might have an inherent hatred of losing that didn't just start in trading. Maybe went back for years. Right? Just think about, how'd you do in T-ball, right? How'd you do in high school, or in getting jobs, or in other performance environments, or other places where you were competing. Right? If you handle losing in all of those places badly, well, then naturally you're going to handle losing here just as badly. And so then we're not dealing with a problem that just started here, but one that is very well entrenched. So it's going to take some time to make that adjustment. You can't just snap your fingers and say, all right, I'm going to handle mistakes differently. Right? There's going to be a transition that's going to take place. Right? And some of that transition might mean here, right, that losing doesn't define me. Okay. So sometimes losing can hit you on a personal level, or, losses are part of this game, right? Kind of going to the very superficial basics of how trading operates. Or maybe losing means that you're not perfect. You're not living up to your expectations. You're expecting to make money every day, right? These are some examples of flaws that can, kind of run around in the background of your mind and create that overreaction to losing. Another one is something called prospect theory. Those of you know, Daniel Kahneman wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. It's kind of the behavioral, like the godfather of behavioral economics. Prospect theory was his first kind of big breakthrough. And what it describes is this relationship and how people react to winning and losing. And what he found was that losing hurts way more than winning feels good. And so when that relationship is so off like that, well, then you might naturally be much more avoidant to losing just because of how much pain it causes, right? And so what we're trying to do there is reduce the pain, or at least make you more accustomed to it. Learn how to take a punch like a boxer, and then elevate winning. But truthfully, we want to elevate execution, right? So, losses from mistakes should hurt more than losses from good execution. Okay, that's number one. And wins from good execution should feel better than wins from poor execution, right? Just to start to break apart and add a little bit of complexity in how you're reacting. So it's not just losing money, it's the how you're losing money. So again, I'm giving it kind of a handful of ideas that can be helpful here, but the bottom line is you want to start to really figure out how your emotions are reacting to losing and what are the underlying flaws and biases, wishes, et cetera, that are associated with that. All right, at a certain point, we're going to need to go to the lightning round. We're not there quite yet, but I will. There's a lot of questions that came in today, which is great. I've often heard having good risk management is not gambling, but the majority of traders still lose. When it is time to recognize the cognitive dissonance, right? Is that still gambling, or should I keep pushing? There's a lot in here, and I can't make firm decisions for people, but first off, let's look at good risk management is not gambling, but good risk management is not the whole picture, right? You need to have a profitable strategy. You can have like perfect risk management, but going along with a bad strategy, like you're going to lose money, right? You are going to the casino at that point because you're betting on a negative edge, which to me is my definition of gambling. Okay. Gambling is betting on a negative edge. You are guaranteed to lose money in the long run. Okay. Otherwise, gambling, as it's sort of typically talked about in society, is like just different degrees of risk taking. And there are people all around the world who would never consider themselves to be gamblers or risk takers that are, right? I had a friend who was, loved to bake and decided to open up a bakery in March of 2020. I mean, they didn't know how much they were gambling. And that scenario was sort of drawing dead in a sense. But even if they weren't, let's say they opened up, now, I don't know how skilled they are in business, right? But the bottom line is like, there are a lot of variables to running a business versus just, kind of loving to bake and having people, love what you do. So people take gambles in lots of ways. Question is, are you betting on a negative edge? And that is where the gambling lies. So I would focus a bit more on your strategy and finding out if it actually does have edge, because that's what's going to determine whether or not you're gambling or not. How do you train yourself better on risk management and not get married to losing positions? So the question here is like, is it really about training risk management? That's a real thing, right? Especially if you're kind of new and kind of understanding the mechanics of it and the principles behind it and how you do it properly. But this question makes me think that there may be more of like an emotional attachment to losing positions that makes you far more attached to them. And so when that happens, it blocks your ability to utilize that risk management skills that you have. And that's generally what happens when emotions get big in general. It's not just with risk management, but we lose access to the things that we're learning. We lose access to the things that we generally know well. We revert back to our instincts, and how well our instincts are trained, determines how well you're going to trade there. So, I work with traders who, been doing this for 30 plus years, very, very successful. Them at their worst is head and shoulders above, many of you, even at your best, because even emotionally compromised, there's just a lot of things they're not going to do anymore. Why? Because they have trained that instinctual knowledge. There's just a lot that they've mastered. Okay. So when you have this strong emotional attachment to losing positions, right, we need to, again, as I mentioned before, understand what is driving that emotion. And maybe it is very simply not wanting to realize a loss because of how consequential and emotionally impactful those losing trades are. When you're still in it, you can still hope, right? And we all know that hope is not a strategy, but when hope is involved, right, there can be a lot more danger at play there, because it's going to compel you to do things that are more, gambly, right? You're going to be more betting on that negative edge in that spot by holding on to it when, your strategy says that it needs to get dumped. All right. When in tilt during a trading session, what is your best advice to help someone step out of that mindset before causing any more damage to their trading account? I actually kind of discussed that before with that map of tilt, right? You've got to be able to catch it early. If you don't catch it early, your emotions are going to steamroll you. Okay. And I've kind of been talking around this, but the principle is simply this. Okay? I call it the malfunctioning mind. When your emotional system becomes overactive, it has the power to shut down higher brain function, right? Shut down the ability to think, to plan, to make decisions, right? Self-awareness is still retained for a long time, but eventually it can go away too. There's also another key piece of a higher brain function that goes away: emotional control. Okay, so I'll say this once more. The emotional system has the power to shut down the part of the brain responsible for controlling emotions. So here you are, right, kind of falling down that curve, right? Emotions are getting bigger. They are decreasing the part of the brain that would actually help you to recover. So you have to be well prepared for those moments, which is why the data collection is so important, why the map is so critical, so you can take action early before those emotions escalate. Because once they do, right, your ability to make decisions that are kind of work to kind of reduce that tilt goes down significantly. All right, we're going to kind of shift into lightning round here. Hi, Jared. Big fan of your work, the mental game of trading. I'm currently going through a mental hand history and mapping out my fear of losing. How long would you suggest rewiring this one specific flaw before trying to decipher other areas of your C game that needs attention? Basically, how long does it take for resolution to occur? So, for those that don't know my work, resolution is basically the point where those flaws, biases, wishes, illusions are corrected. It's like upgrading a piece of software, right? Those flaws are basically error codes. They're bugs that are preventing you from being able to, think properly. It's causing all those emotions. And so when you actually train that correction, it permanently upgrades your mentality. And, it doesn't eliminate your anger or your fear, but it does eliminate it for that particular reason. So in this case, we're dealing with the fear of losing. If you know what that correction is, then it is just about getting a ton of training in order to upgrade that perspective. That is a true solution to your mental game. But you can't solve your trading psychology. You can't solve your mental game forever because there's just too much evolution that's involved, right? You're just like in trading with your strategy, right? There's always kind of more things you can learn. Okay, wait, pull back here. So resolution is sort of the end point of dealing with a particular problem. And it's a little variable. It could take anywhere between 3 and 18 months. Okay, depending on how severe it is, right? When you're dealing with like a long-standing problem, that's been around for a very, very long time, it could take, an upwards of 18 months. But your first question is like, how long do I need to work on this before I need to move on to the next thing? And that is a very different question and answer. You don't have to wait 18 months or a year or 6 months or 3 months before you can move on to the next one. Right? You only have to gain enough command that you can reliably have that strategy in place on a day-to-day basis. And then it's just about getting the repetition whenever it shows up. Okay? And you'll know that your mind's a bit freed up because that's getting easier and easier to do. You're seeing that in general, you're in much more command. It's not automatic yet. Okay. But for the most part, you're able to avoid a lot of the big mistakes. So it's really to your discretion, right? If this is a massive problem and you can't see smaller ones yet, then stick with it. But if you have some command of it and you can see a couple other problems, by all means, jump into it, right? You can kind of stack up the number of things you're working on at once as the other things you're working on get easier and easier to manage. What would you recommend to a new trader? Should he trade alone or seek a community? There's obviously some personal difference here. I would say there's the balance of both would be ideal, right? You can save a lot of time and a lot of energy, a lot of heartache, by learning from others. But sometimes learning from others can really impair your ability to create your own fingerprint on the market when you get sort of too compulsively involved in what others are doing to the damage of your own sort of personality style, et cetera. So I think a balance is a good way to go. If you had to break down the characteristics of high performers, what would they be? And how would one go about developing those characteristics? So I think there's many. Having a love and a passion for what you do is a requirement. And if you don't have that, then it doesn't mean you can't be a high performer in trading. But if you don't have a deep love for the markets or a deep curiosity for, how they operate and interest in that, you're just here to make money, which is cool. Okay. I have no problem with that. But you're unlikely to be among the best in the world. And that may not be your goal, so it may not matter, right? But I think it's kind of very difficult to cultivate love and passion without just putting in a lot of time. Sometimes that love and passion is there. Sometimes it's more like an arranged marriage where it just takes time to cultivate and develop over time. Curiosity and open-mindedness, I think, are essential as well. You can't really learn if you're not curious and you're not open-minded. If you're closed-minded and think you know it all, well then, you're not going to learn. And top performers are really ruthless about, learning and being curious, especially around their weak points. That's where sometimes is the hardest for many of you, to be honest. But the best in the world, like, they are almost like just ruthless, but also fearful of their weak points, because they know that is what can undermine their ability to achieve the outcomes that they want. And so they want to know what those are, right? And they, seek out feedback. They look to kind of find those blind spots, because when they're there and you don't know what they are, you're very, very likely to struggle in ways that are unknown to you. Whenever I get a losing trade, I would tend to have a bad habit of over trading, revenge trading. How do I stop myself? So revenge trading is a combination of anger and some weakness in confidence. And it's that weakness in confidence that I would suggest you focus on first, because it's usually the thing that's most unknown, right? And so data collection worksheet would be the beginnings of how you can start to figure out what exactly is getting triggered, right? What is that weak point in your confidence? If you can figure out what that is, that's your best start. But to just stop yourself right out of the gate, right? Having a bit more of that data collection, a bit more of that map to catch it early is your way to stop it. But that's not a solution. The solution is going to come from understanding the causality. Do you think it's important to develop a winning trading strategy before working on a proper mindset to trade? Yes, by and large. You can work on your mindset. You can work on your mental game before you have that. But for the most part, you're going to rely on the problems that you experienced in other aspects of life, or currently struggle with in other aspects of life. If you've got a tendency to be overconfident or have low confidence, or to be like I said, to hate to lose, to hate to make mistakes, you're a perfectionist, you're high expectations of yourself, you have a lot of FOMO in your life, well, you're probably going to have all those problems in trading. So you can work on them, but work on them on a personal level or outside of trading and other performance environments. And that work will translate in trading. But when you don't have a strong strategy, it becomes very difficult to know where the mental game is going to most apply. Because for the most part, I can't make you a better trader, right? I can make you better at not, I can make you better at accessing your knowledge, and I can make it easier for you to avoid the big mistakes that tend to plague you. The other sort of asterisk here is, like, you can develop more, of an ability to get in the zone and to kind of higher level levels of performance, right? Get on that performance stress curve, the top of that performance stress curve more often. But if you don't have a good strategy, well, you're basically kind of gambling at that point. And having a better mentality is not going to make you a better trader. All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions here. I'm curious as to the psychological factors and possible solutions to when you have a large amount of green days and trades in a row, and you begin to think you are due for a loss statistically. For me, whenever I acknowledge I have had a large amount of profitable days or profitable trades in a row, the next one always seems to be a loser. There is also no set time for this to occur. It could be 5, 10, 15 days of profit in a row before that thought comes into play. But once it does, the outcome always seems to be negative. Is there a way to avoid this mindset? First off, it's very, very likely that there's some sort of false confirmation that you're getting here. The odds that this is playing out exactly as you imagine is very, very low, right? You are likely having those thoughts that the next one could be a loser well before that. And you're just not necessarily getting the confirmation, right? There might be a little bit of a confirmation bias in you that is like seeking that kind of causal connection between your thoughts and losing trades. You are not causing those losses, which is what you're kind of implying here, right? Just because you're thinking that the next trade is going to lose does not mean that that's what's going to happen. Okay, nobody has that kind of control over the market. That's wishful thinking at best. So, how do you get out of this mindset? I mean, first and foremost, you got to know exactly what I just said, which is that you are not in control of this. This is not like The Secret, right, where you're willing the market to your knees, right, and visualizing money coming to you. I mean, that stuff is such. To me, it's disgusting because it's propagated these fantasies and wishes in society that we can just will results through the power of our visualization and through the power of our intent. If that were true, and I've worked with a lot of poker players. I'll use a poker example to make this even more clear, okay? If that was true, if the secret and the power of your mind to will results was like what people think it is, then theoretically you could change the next card that was going to come. Because let's say we're playing Nolan Hold'em, there's 4 cards on the board, right? And here you are willing the one card that you need on the river to win the hand, right? If what you're saying is true, then that card has to change on the deck before it gets placed down. You don't know what you needed before. You do now. But there's no way that that's actually what's happening. You're just getting lucky because there is statistically a chance for that to happen. Okay. And if it were true, not only are you willing cards to change, or in this case, willing, price action to change, you're also like competing with other people for who has the stronger will. Because if this is how the game's played, then everybody's going to do it. And now it's not, who has the better tactics, who has a better mentality. It's like who can will money, who can will results their way. That's going to win. I mean, come on, that can't be how the world exists. So that's the part of your mindset that has to change here. All right, last question. How could I become a best trader? And I think what they're asking is like, how can I become the best trader that I can be? And I've said a few things about high performers, but I think the willingness to be honest with yourself, to do hard things is essential. We live in a society now where, instantaneously through our phones, through social media, through lots of other forms of distraction, we can eliminate discomfort. And there's a lot of ways in which discomfort has been eliminated. But if you're going to be successful, you've got to embrace that discomfort, because especially working on your mentality, working on your emotions, there's going to be points where it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be confusing. It's going to be a little overwhelming. And all of that means that you're doing it right. There's a great quote from the University of Alabama's strength and conditioning coach, right? Football strength and conditioning coach. And he basically said, if it feels good, you're doing it wrong. Okay. He's like, this powerful figure in the gym barking at his players, right? If it feels good, you're doing it wrong. Now that's different than pain, right? Pain is a signal that something's clearly wrong. But when you're talking about discomfort, being overwhelmed, these are essential things to feel when you're doing this work. It doesn't come easily. And if it did, it certainly wouldn't be as rewarding. And again, I'm speaking for everybody that wants to become a good trader, not somebody who's trying to make money instantaneously. Okay? Those are very different motives. And so embrace that discomfort, do the work, and you will make progress. How much progress? To be determined. All right, but at least that's the first step you can take. All right, Hug, I'm out. I got out of questions and I think I'm out of time.
Hogue, you're on mute.
This is better. I'm exhausted watching that. It was excellent. Jared, it's really just got to be, you really have to have a great sense of accomplishment or pride, because all of the people that you touch, every time you're on here, it's really just great. All the comments in chat, I mean, everybody loves it. A couple of things. One of the first things you talked about that really kind of stuck out to me is the no ifs, no efforts, I should say.
Yeah.
Right. And I tell people this all the time, if you're down your account, just to put that 10, 15 lot on and see if you can get lucky to get out of the hole isn't going to help you. It's that grind. It's that hard work. It's that, trade by trade, digging yourself out. You're going to be a better trader for it, for sure.
Yeah, it's not easy, but that's why it's so rewarding. And yeah, I mean, this is rewarding for me too. I mean, I think what's great about what I do is that I can teach you all skills that will apply elsewhere in your life, right? If sometimes trading is a bit risky, right? You don't know if all this time is going to pay off, right? All the effort that you put in is going to pay off. But if you work on your mentality, if you work on your mental game, there are things that are getting exposed here. You're going to learn skills and processes that are guaranteed to help you elsewhere, right? And that's sort of kind of de-risks the situation, de-risks the time investment. Because if worst case scenario, you aren't able to make it as a trader, but you've learned some things on my end. You've learned some things about how to become more skilled. Well, that's going to translate. And then it sort of becomes a no risk, no lose proposition. You're going to at least win in some way. And I know that's not exactly what you'd want, but that's rewarding for me because it can have an impact on people's lives in pretty profound ways. So
100%. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jared. Again, don't forget, get the book. The book there's so much actionable items and important things that you're going to get in this book. I'm going through it probably about the third time now. I have a tendency to need to reread a lot. But fantastic book. Jared, thank you so much again for joining us. We'll be looking forward to your next visit with us with great eagerness.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Good to see you as always. Take care, everybody.
Good to see you.